Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
The S1 Racing Series is back again for round 3 of the season. We've now broken out of the Americas, as tonight we bring you GT3 action from the winding, kangaroo-infested hills of New South Wales. Welcome to Bathurst, and welcome to Apex Racing TV's coverage of the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. I'm your host, Ron Mullins. Joining me in the commentary booth is Taylor Stallworthy, with Joshua Wilkie working the cameras in the virtual production hauler. And now, Taylor, we're 3 rounds into the season. We're nearly at the halfway mark. It's kind of hard to believe that we're even at the halfway mark, but we've made it. And so far, the standout star of the season has been Gregory Hoveson. What do you think?
Oh, he certainly has. I mean, dominant start in both races, and already here in qualifying, he's potentially looking to get another victory here in beautiful Australia at the Bathurst circuit, at the Mount Panorama circuit. And yeah, he's been on fire, and I would not be surprised if he stays that way continuing today.
Yeah, he has definitely been on fire, driving like his car is on fire, which it certainly has been so far this season. He has back-to-back wins so far this season, although last time out 2 weeks ago in Road America wasn't the most easy win in the world for the Canadian. He had some challenges there throughout the field, but was able to pull ahead of Kyle Domark, who is actually ahead of right now in qualifying, as we are about 12 and a half minutes into this session. It's Hoveson once again dominating, well clear the next car, that being Domark in P2, but the two Mercedes up there at the front, the Mercedes, we were talking before this broadcast started about the stability of the Mercedes, and that certainly played a role last week in Road America, which, although it's not the most grip-dependent track in the world, did play well with the two Mercedes who finished 1 and 2 in the standings. Certainly Gregory Hoveson has worked that car beautifully so far this season. He's currently at the top of the championship standings, and right behind him is actually a tie between Olivier Bellinger and Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, and that's Justin Hill right behind them, only 5 points behind in P3, but the gap between P1 and the tied P2 in the standings right now, it's between 70 points for Hoveson and 45 for the drivers behind. So we've got a bit of a gap in the driver standings, and right now it looks like Hoveson is going to extend that gap even more. We'll just have to wait and see how the final few moments of qualifying play out, and of course we still have a 45-minute race to contend with a pit stop involved as well, so it's definitely not game set match for Hoveson, but right now it's looking good for him.
Yeah, and this is a pretty sizable qualifying gap, a full 6.5 tenths up on Domark. That Mercedes stability probably coming into effect here at a very challenging circuit in Mount Panorama. And We'll have to see if that advantage continues throughout the race, and looking as well at the challengers of Bellinger and Barrera. Bellinger currently P4, Barrera in P8, but they're only about 0.3 of a second between each other. A very close fight for P2 could very well be underway once we are underway at Mount Panorama.
One of the drivers up towards the front of the qualifying order right now is the S1 Racing Series founder and admin, Simon Atro, has actually switched from the Ferrari. He's had a rough start to the season. He had 2 crashes back-to-back to kick the season off, and he's now switched to the Mercedes, as you can see him going through the top end of the circuit right now. And it's we've noticed this so far with the Ferrari so far this season in iRacing, ever since it's been implemented, whether it's been here in the S1 Series in the 2 races we've had so far, or whether it was in the ARL GT3 trophy earlier this season, where the Ferrari was in for the final 3 rounds of the season, and the Ferrari was also incredibly unstable there. So I think that's definitely something we'll have to keep our eye on throughout this season. It's something we've kept our eye on so far this year, but you can see a strong amount of participation for the Ferraris. You've got Rennsport right now in P3 and a Ferrari, then you've got a pack of Ferraris from 9th down to 13th, and then you've got another Ferrari down there in P17. So a lot of Ferrari participation here, but you can see the pantomime is starting to shift a little bit with Simon switching to the Mercedes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. He's now taking the same car as the top 2 and finds himself in the middle of that big P3 to P10 pack. Currently in P7 is Bellinger. Actually will improve to 3rd very quickly, getting a 2:02.8, becoming the 4th driver to break into the 2:02s, as someone has got it horribly wrong off the final corner.
Right now, the qualifying standings looking very similar to some of the race standings that we've seen. You see Hovesen there up front, as he's really taken a foothold on that position throughout most of the season, and Kyle Domark, who we're following right now, going down the Conrad straightaway. He definitely put on a very good drive in Road America. Was really the only person so far this season that's been able to contend with Hovesen. But then you've actually got Olivier Bellinger there in P3, who's tied for P2 in the standings, started off the year with a podium. And while he did have a rough round 2 weeks ago at Road America, he's definitely still going to be in this fight, but just very spread out field. But then, as you said, that battle pretty much from Hovesen back is very close right now. Justin Hall's in the middle of it. He finished on the podium, I believe, 2 weeks ago at Road America, and he's just been a quiet contender. We've seen definitely an ebb and flow so far this season. We've seen some drivers wash out in terms of contending for podiums and wins, but right now Hovesen is really the dominant force, and it looks like he's going to grab the pole for tonight's race.
Not a surprise to see him back on top with a very comfortable margin, but anything can happen when we do get underway. Once the pace lap is completed and we're fully set for racing, it'll be up to Domark to try to challenge him, or even someone else further down the field, so I'm very excited.
I'll briefly correct myself when I said that Justin Hall was actually on the podium last time out. It was actually Hovesen, Domark, and Justin Barrera, so I got the Justin right. It was just Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, as we call him on these broadcasts. He was in 3rd last time out, got a great podium after a rough first race in Sebring about a month ago at this point. So qualifying is just about wrapped up. Some drivers are puddling around the racetrack, just trying to just be around, do some added laps, do some sighting laps, and I think we might get the starting grid up here soon. But it's Hovesen that will grab the pole position, as we have one more driver. That's Hall, just doing some sighting laps right now, going through the cutting right now. This is a brilliant track. Anyone that's driven it in the sim, or anyone that's in the YouTube chat right now that's actually driven in real life, which I'm not going to say that anyone has, but I have my dad said anyone has in the other YouTube chat. But anyways, anyone that has driven this track in the sim knows that it is a roller coaster ride. It has a lot of elevation change, has some beautiful corners on this track, and some iconic corners as well. And hopefully the iconic corners and bends on this track can lend itself to some iconic racing tonight. So I believe we'll get the starting grid up here soon. Yes, thank you, Josh. And our pole sitter for tonight's race is Gregory Hovesen, as we mentioned, fairly dominant over the rest of the field. Kyle Domark will join him on the front row. That's Olivier Bellinger in P3. Spencer Retzema in 4th in the Ferrari. That's Simon Attrill switching from the Ferrari to the Mercedes in 5th. That's a good qualifying performance from him. He'll hopefully try and keep it clean in tonight's race. And then we have Justin Hall in P6, Ryan Sklani in P7, and that's Justin Dive Bomberera in 8th position. That's Jake Luther in 9th. Bialata in 10th, and that's Grizzle in P11, and Adelotus rounding out your top 12. Then looking through the rest of the field is Matthew Perrin in P13, Robert Elder in 14th, DeHinza in 15th position, that's Pascal in 16th, Cassano in 17th, Finch in 18th, and then Shane Brown rounding out your field, who did not set a qualifying time in the number 069 car. And right now the drivers are on the just right short of the chase, which is a very challenging corner. Many challenging corners on this track, which I think will challenge many of these drivers. I'll ask you this quick question before we get into the race start here, Taylor. What do you think is going to be the most challenging corner for these drivers?
Oof, there is going to be a lot of them, and honestly, I think it kind of depends just the different stages of the race. There's a lot of tough corners to navigate, but I think especially on lap 1, watch out for Griffin's Bend. It's off a very long straightaway where drivers are going to be very aggressive, getting those early spots, and that's where I think we could see a little bit of drama and a little bit of action. But as the race goes through, just trying to get through Skyline and the Dipper through turns 11 and 15, it's a very tricky corner to consistently get right over the course of a race. So expect a couple maybe skill issues, as you'd call them, or other maybe minor incidents in that middle sector of the course. But yeah, certainly watch whether it's a slow or a fast corner to definitely be some action. You won't want to take your eyes off the screen, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I think this racing is going to be action-packed all throughout. We've got 45 minutes of racing action ahead of us, a pit stop to contend with, and I'm sure it's going to put on some interesting and fantastic racing as we've seen so far this season. So the drivers are making their way into Murray's Corner. They're going to go around this final bend and take the green flag here. The iRacing flagman is going to wave the green flag in a few moments here. The field is on their way, heading into turn 1, Hell Corner, and it's Hovesen getting a fantastic start there, jumping ahead of Domark. He is going to take the lead comfortably going into turn 1, though we've got some drivers going side by side farther behind. That's a Ferrari, I believe that's Jake Luther. That's very sideways, actually beached himself on the curb coming out of turn 1, but so far the drivers are going single file. Someone has some side-by-side action in the midfield, but right now the drivers have kept it fairly clean. I think these drivers realize that there's a lot of racing still left to go in tonight's race. I think these drivers are trying to keep it calm, keep it clean, and definitely trying to avoid accidents on this lap 1, which had a very tight and twisty track, which Bathurst is. It's very easy to have an incident that could snowball very quickly into a massive pileup. So these drivers definitely taking it easy fairly early on.
Yeah, not a lot of major incidents, although something's wrong. It's Eric Bellata dropping down the field and headed to the pits. He may be the first casualty of Mount Panorama as Hovesen continues to hold on to the lead. He and Domark are already getting a comfortable gap to the rest of the field.
I believe that was an incident going through the cutting, which is a very tricky corner, and it's just trying to get the throttle, just trying to get on throttle coming through that uphill left-handed hairpin is fairly tricky. I know from my experience driving on this track, you have the scenario where one wheel is just spinning and the other one's just kind of like locked in place. So that's an unfortunate incident for that driver. He is going to be out of this race, but the front two are pulling away right now. You can see the gap between the second place and third place runners, and then you can see farther behind all the way back to what is that, P7, I believe. The gap between P7 and P8 right now is fairly large. It's an expansive gap. You've got some side-by-side action here going into the chase. I'm not sure where these drivers are going side by side into the chase. This is a very sketchy section of the track to go side by side in, but they go single file as they go through the kink. That was actually Pern there that was involved in that battle with Elder, and now he's getting challenged by Finch behind. So that is some hard racing. I was saying at the start of this race how these drivers were trying to take it easy, and then right as I say that, we see some drivers going side by side into the chase, and incident fairly early on.
It certainly is, and by the way, it looks like Luther is actually heading to the pits. I'm not sure whether that is going to be a connection issue, as we're going to have a replay earlier on camera on Italiotis as they go through one of the slow and windy sections. Oh, no. And this was the incident with Pelota. They both get into the wall. Italiotis, I think, just missing the braking point, and that has led to disaster on lap 1.
We'll say one thing about that corner. It's in certain conditions here in iRacing, it's very tricky to sight out there, so I think that could be the reason why that incident happened. But we've had more incidents throughout the field. You can see that 3 drivers are already out, and we'll get a replay to see what happened here. This was an incident with Rennsport, who was one of our front starters who we had our eyes on in this race very early on, and just outbreaking himself badly at the bottom of the S, is going into Forrest Elbow, and then he gets hit coming out of the corner. I believe that's actually in Forrest Elbow. He spun coming through the dipper. So sadly for Rennsport, he has a very early incident that takes him out of the race. Just very unfortunate for these drivers. Already 3 drivers out of this 19-car field. So we have 3 drivers down, 16 still remain, and right now we're only 3.5 minutes into this 45-minute night.
Yeah, a lot of action on lap 1, and we still have, as you mentioned, over 40 minutes to go. Looking at Bellinger trying to keep up with that leading duo, but it's not hard. They've got over a second to him, and Domark even has the slipstream advantage.
Yeah, I think this is looking like a repeat of Road America. You've got the 2 drivers in the Mercedes kind of matched at the moment and just trying to pull away from Bellinger, who's trying everything he can to keep up. But right now, he's just falling slowly out of that slipstream, which at a track like this, which while it is very tight and technical, especially at the top end of the circuit, you do have very long straightaways to contend with. You've got the Conrad straightaway, and then you've got the mountain straightaway that these drivers are going to hit very soon. That plays a big role in just trying to keep close. So if you don't have that slipstream effect, you're going to definitely run into some issues trying to battle with some cars. But right now we've got Justin Dive Bomber Barrera right behind. I believe that's Simon Admiral right ahead of him going down the mountain straightaway. Barrera didn't have the best exit coming out of Hell Corner, so he's not going to be able to get the move done unless he goes for one of his signature dive bombs going into turn 2. Closes up a lot in the braking zone, but it's just not close enough. I think the slipstream is going to play a massive role into this race. And another thing that the slipstream is going to help besides track position and just trying to get past other drivers, one thing that's going to help these drivers with is trying to save fuel, because we do have pit stops in these races, and that will be something to contend with in probably about 25 minutes time.
Yeah, certainly it's going to come down to the strategies as well. We've taken a look, we've seen in the past where a couple times the over or undercut can be useful, and that level of strategy will once again be effective today. Let's take a look back at Shane Brown's crash over at the start of the race. He remains in the pits, as I believe Spencer Reitzman may be back on track, but once again going through a slower section and just getting it wrong, spinning. It's not a hard hit, but it looked like he lost that rear, yeah, you can see he lost the spoiler, and that is a very important part of the car. He had to go straight to the pits to get it repaired, and now we're watching Barrera trying to close up on Attrell. Even on a very long straight like this one, it may be a little bit too hard to get enough momentum for an overtake, but he was right on his bumper going into turn 1 onto the previous lap, and I have a feeling he'll be back there again. Maybe is he looking down the inside? No, but he'll close up even further as they get set for lap 4 coming up shortly.
It's just so important to have a great exit coming out of those corners. It's not the easiest corners to get right either. Hell Corner is definitely a tightening 90-degree left. That's very tricky for some of these drivers to sight out. So that's a very tricky corner to get right, going on to the second longest straightaway, Mountain Straight, before you hit turn 2. And then just going through that very tricky, just trying to go through the S's, negotiate them well enough, and then set yourself up coming through the dipper to try and get a good exit there. That's very imperative for these drivers, but they'll try and find any way to get past. Just look at Pern, who is now getting past Elder coming into turn 1. I believe Finch was involved in this battle in the BMW a few laps ago, but he's towed back to the pits. Not sure what happened there. I think it's just simple spins for some of these drivers that are causing them to tow, because we've seen many times in real life how easy a pileup can happen at the far end of the track, which is just so incredibly narrow. It's just basically a glorified alleyway that some of these drivers are racing down at speeds excess of 100 miles an hour. So these drivers are probably just towing back to the pits to avoid getting T-boned and damaging their cars even more. So that could be the reason why we're seeing some drivers tow so very early on. But right now we've also got some good racing action all up and down the field, and right now we've got a nice cat and mouse sort of moment here between Hovesen and Domark. They're still very close.
They certainly are, and I don't expect this battle to end anytime soon. Hovesen's always able to gain a little extra time in the slow sections, but thanks to the long straights at the start and end of a lap, it gives Domark a chance to use the slipstream and reduce the gap. Coming through the windy section, it was at 0.88, and now it's all the way down, going to be about 0.6 of a second, maybe even 5, heading into the next turn. Now, talking about how hard of a track this is to race, it's very much like a street circuit, except it's the furthest thing you could really say from a street circuit, at the same time keeping all of the street circuit, I'm struggling to find the right word, but the qualities of it.
Yeah, that's usually you see on street circuits, they're just overly bumpy and just really hard to get right. This track has grass shoulders around it, some gravel traps here and there, but it is also public roads. There are parts of this track that you can drive in real life if you find yourself in New South Wales, Australia, which I personally haven't, but maybe someone in the YouTube chat has. But these are public roads that regular traffic use on a day-to-day basis, but it's definitely more of a purpose-built racetrack. Was built originally as a purpose-built racetrack, as some circuits all across the world have been. You know, Le Mans is part permanent circuit and part street circuit, so there's many tracks like it in the world, but it creates a very unique flavor here. I think the word unique can definitely be used to describe this circuit. You mentioned the street circuit feel, definitely in this section of the track, which is so narrow. You have little room to hide and no room to hide, little room to run if you make any sort of mistake. So it gives a very nice street circuit flavor, and also creates some very blind corners that if you make some kind of mistake coming through, you are done for. Now we've got Justin Hall following him towards the top end of the circuit. He's put together a good race right now, up 2 positions. You can see the graphic on the left-hand side of your screen. You can see that De Hinze has actually moved up 9. He's currently, my apologies, he's currently running a P9. He's moved up 6 spots so far in this race, so he's putting together a very good drive now. Retsema has actually dropped back the most. He, of course, had that issue in that Ferrari that took him out. And one thing that I do notice is that of the drivers that have had some kind of incident so far, a lot of them have involved Ferraris, but that one driver that made that mistake, well, it wasn't really a mistake. It was Retsema getting hit by De Hinze very early on in this race. That wasn't really a mistake. Well, that wasn't a mistake from Retsema. That was probably a mistake from De Hinze, if we're being brutally honest. But one thing that we aren't seeing a lot of in this race that we have seen so far this season is these Ferraris getting caught out by the very high curbs. That's something that this track doesn't have a whole lot of, especially towards the top end of this track. But towards the more permanent built sections, like coming through the chase here, where you have those high curbs, I think we might see some Ferraris get caught out. What do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, I certainly think so, especially as we get some more aggressive fights along the way. This fight here with Piran very well could be one of those spots where Piran goes a little too far and the Ferrari just doesn't have enough to give in the fight. But so far, he's doing a good job to keep straight and avoid many errors, and I think it's going to be that mix of aggression, fighting for positions, but also making sure that you're not going too aggressive and making a mistake here, which is so easy to do. Skalny was looking to the inside of Barrera, but ultimately backs away from the BMW, biding his time for another opportunity as they continue the uphill climb at Mount Panorama, getting relatively close into the corner, but staying ever so close to Barrera. He was a full 10th faster on the previous lap. As they keep climbing, and now will begin the descent. A very tough set of corners coming up right here. And with the pressure of an added battle, they're going to both try to avoid any mistakes.
I think the biding your time quote is very apt for this racing that we're seeing right now. These drivers aren't really going for the most balls-to-the-wall side-by-side moves. They shouldn't at this stage of the race. We're only 11 and a half minutes in to this 45-minute race. There's still a lot to play for. Many opportunities for these drivers to make a mistake, especially at this track with 23 corners. So I think biding your time is a perfect way to describe the racing we're seeing right now. These drivers are being patient, they're being respectful, but most importantly, they're saving up their stuff towards definitely trying to save up their stuff for a towards the end of the race assault on their competitors. You're just trying to tug the laps down. They're just trying to get towards the end of the race, and then probably in the last 15 minutes is when these drivers are probably going to turn out the wick, break their elbows out, and start to battle really hard.
Yeah, certainly. And we're taking a look over at Stephen Finch. He's in danger of going a lap down, I believe. You see the rest of the lead pack getting ever so closer. And he's going to need to back away quickly before he potentially gets in the way of the Hovesen and Domark fight. But yeah, solid start for Finch, and trying to avoid any further incidents will help try to give him a solid position overall. There he pulls to the inside for the leading duo. Half a second gap between Domark and Hovesen. as they continue. Last lap for Domark was a full 10th quicker than Hoverson, but still about half a second back.
Yeah, just taking a quick look at my live timing screen right now, they're fairly evenly matched pace-wise. They've set best laps that are basically identical. Hoverson at a 2:02.79 and Domark at a 2:02.84, so they're fairly matched pace-wise. Right now, it looks like Domark is having a little bit of a pace advantage right now. He gets that slipstream, but I think if we'd like to... Oh, boy, that's a big slide there. Was that from... No, that was the lapped car. My apologies there. That was, yeah, the lapped car there of Finch there that had the big moment coming through. That was still a very close call coming through the top end of the circuit. That's not a corner you want to make a mistake on, especially with that outside concrete barrier that comes out of nowhere. But one thing that I do feel like we're seeing with the battle up towards the front is I think Domark is really taking it easy at this stage of the race, as we're seeing Finch hit the wall again coming out of Forest Elbow, a corner named after a motorcycle driver, a motorcycle rider I should say, with the other last name Forrest, who scraped his elbow on that exact wall. So it's a beautifully named corner there, and might have to name it Finch's Door after that small little incident there.
Attrell able to get past Finch and now is looking to close up to Justin Hall. He'll have a nice little slipstream advantage. And again, coming out of the final corner and through turn 1, if he's within 2 to 3 tenths, the slipstream may be enough for him to open a move. That'll be easier said than done. By the way, Gregory Hoverson, new fastest lap, a 2:02.75.
There we go. He is definitely turning up the wick at this stage of the race. Was about a 10th and a half quicker than his adversary. One thing that I was going to say is that we might see something with that Domark battle. I think Domark is probably just lifting off, because with that gap that they have, even though Domark is about a half a second away from Hoverson, I'm sure he's closing up quite well. For all we know, we could see some of these drivers just lifting off, being like, you know what, I'm just going to stay behind here, pick up that slipstream so I won't have to take as much fuel. We mentioned multiple times during this broadcast, and I'll say it again, how the pit stops are going to be very important. You mentioned it very early on this broadcast, Taylor, how we're going to have to see if these drivers attempt to do an undercut or an overcut. We saw that work out quite well last week when we saw that battle between Hoverson and Domark. It worked out quite well for Hoverson, who was able to extend that gap, although it did close quite a lot towards the finish. But we'll definitely see some strategy play a big role in this race, where you don't really have the most amount of racing action in the world. These drivers are just really ticking down the laps at this stage, and trying to nearly have a accident there with Barrera scraping the wall going into turn 11 there. I think these drivers are just trying to keep it clean right now, tick down the laps, save some fuel, which is really important with that slipstream effect, so they can take less fuel in the pit stops, have a quicker stop, and then jump ahead of their rivals. I think the strategy is going to play a massive role in how this race ends up.
I think it certainly will, and one thing I've noticed as well, I think the Porsches may be a little slower than a few of their counterparts. Scully is not getting a huge slipstream advantage. He also could be coasting, as you have predicted from time to time at this stage of the race, looking to conserve some fuel, but it may be that the Porsche struggles a little bit in terms of the straight line speed against the BMW, because across the rest of the track, it looks like Scully has a pretty nice advantage over Barrera, and despite being relatively close, hasn't had many opportunities for the overtake. He's a little slower on the acceleration here, was very close, and as they start a new lap coming through Hell's Corner over in turn 1, let's see if he's able to gain some distance as they begin the long hill climb. For cars with DRS, this would be the DRS section, but obviously not at the moment. And yeah, as you can see, he's not able to close up a lot of distance.
Yeah, I was trying to listen to very closely to see if he was just trying to lift or anything like that. No, it sounded like that Porsche engine was at full song. It's just for some reason he is very slow. Maybe it's a setup change. Maybe he's running a much higher downforce setup than Barrera up ahead. But that's definitely that's a killer at this track, where the biggest overtaking opportunities are going down those straightaways. Having the high downforce may make your car a lot more stable, but I think that's playing a big role. I mean, you can just see from the size of the car, the Porsche is a much smaller vehicle than the BMW. It's been kind of a running joke in the sports car circles for many years now, how the BMW M8 is just a massive race car, but the fact that that BMW, which is basically a flying brick, is going so much quicker down the straightaways than that Porsche is honestly surprising. So I think maybe there's some kind of damage. I don't think there would be damage because I don't believe we've seen an incident involving Scalny so far in this race. I think the reason why that's the case is probably down to some kind of setup preferences. At this track, which is very tight and twisty, a lot of drivers really depend on their setup. I'll ask you this, Taylor. If you were a driver in this race, do you think you would go for a high downforce setup, or you think you'd try and focus your car's setup on those straight line blasts?
It kind of depends on where I'm at against the rest of the field, because if I'm fighting at the top of the field, I'd probably want high speed to try to really make the most of those overtaking opportunities. But if I find myself in the bottom stages of the field, I'd much rather the stability, sacrificing a bit of downforce, or no, not downforce, sacrificing some straight line speed to allow myself to be a little more consistent and more comfortable as I try to find my way, battling maybe a top 10 and nothing too crazy. And I think in a field like this, I probably would prefer more downforce because I know I probably wouldn't be the fastest driver amongst this group. So I'd rather consistency and be able to hold on for the entire race, because it would be a challenge for me to try to keep it clean.
I think one driver that's probably wanting to have a lot more downforce on his Mercedes right now is Domark, who had a big slide coming out of turn 22, I believe that was, coming out of the chase, and did a little bit of lawn mowing there coming out of the corner. Has actually lost some time to Hovesen right now. So Hovesen is pulling away. It's still very close. I believe this is the closest battle that we have across this field right now. They've been separated by under a second throughout all of this race. This is a nice game of cat and mouse between these two, trying to pressure each other into a mistake right now. But so far, Hovesen, really in this race and throughout this season, he's been flawless this season. I say that he scrapes the wall a little bit coming into the S's there. Saw some sparks flying when that Mercedes made contact with that concrete barrier. But ooh, that was a beautiful shot there as he went through the S's, just so close to that barrier. We'll see going into the dipper. Yeah, you can see a little bit into that barrier there of the other camera. Just no clipping through the barrier. Just Hovesen not putting a foot wrong so far. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed him. But Hovesen, it's just beautiful to see him place that Mercedes around this track and dance it around the race course. But right now, a driver that is challenging him quite a lot is Domark, his teammate.
Yeah, and certainly Domark wants to keep this a close fight, and, well, he's doing the best he can of it, but Hovesen, I think, just staying even more comfortable. Last time, it was a 3/10 advantage, or very close to 3/10 at least, a 2:02.8 versus Domark's 2:03.1. Let's see how the lap time looks this time around. A 2:03.2 from Hovesen, a 2:03.0 for Domark. Bellinger not too far away. And I wonder, he's actually 2.7 behind. Will he maybe try to enter the fight? He's not getting the slipstream advantage, but less dirty air may help him through the windier sections of the track to get a little bit closer. He also may be using a little more fuel though. Domark and Hovesen, their teammates, they could work together and coast a little more on the straights. So that'll be interesting to see, especially since we're not too far away from pit stops, about 21 minutes through, with just a little under 25 minutes to go.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see the pit stops near in the not-too-distant future, and touching on that point that you mentioned there, I think Bellinger joining that battle up towards the front would be terrible news for Kyle Domark right now. He's P7 in the championship, did not score any points in the first round of the season in Sebring, but he scored those 28 points last time out at Road America, was second place that day to Hovesen. So right now I think he's trying to just bank on those championship points. So I think right now in the position he's running in, he's in a very good spot. I'm sure Hovesen is probably cooking those, just definitely cooking the fuel in that car. He is burning through it quite well. But I think Domark right now is cooking his tires, so you've got a little bit of a yin and yang effect of those two Delta Sport teammates in the Mercedes up towards the front of the field. So they're definitely having a nice little dichotomy there between the drivers. But I think both of them are setting each other up quite well. This is a tough one because Hovesen, he's been dominant throughout the start of this season. Really, it'd be dumb to bet against him, but I think Domark is setting himself up quite well. He's probably getting much better fuel mileage than Hovesen up ahead. So I'm not really sure how this race is going to finish because I believe it was very close last time out in Road America. I think it's going to be very close once again. What do you think? How do you think this lead pack battle is going to turn out towards the end of this race?
I have a feeling that Hovesen will be able to hold on. but I also don't think we've seen everything that Dolmark has planned today. Because unlike some of the earlier races, even though Dolmark was pretty quick last time out at Road America, Hovesen was always clearly one step ahead. This time, it feels like Dolmark is able to stay really close. By the way, Grizzle is looking to pit. He's, I think, the first true strategy pit stop of the race. So that'll be interesting to see if the rest of the field will begin to follow him, but he is the first one in without a wreck pit stop. But going back to the Hovesen and Dolmark battle, Dolmark has remained within a second. Even if he sometimes falls about 8 or even 9/10 behind, he always has that slipstream advantage to catch right back up. So it'll be interesting to see. Muscal elects to pit alongside Grizzle, so the first 2 drivers have come into pit lane for the initial pit stops, and we'll have to see where the rest of the field goes. Does Hovesen or Dolmark elect to go in the pits this lap or a future lap? And the question for Dolmark will be, do you follow Hovesen, do you stay out, or do you dive in early to try to get the undercut?
I'm going to be monitoring the race chat here in the session to see if any of these drivers pop up a pit-in message to see what they're going to do. I think it would be... Yeah, maybe it'd be a little bit early to pit at this stage of the race. I think these drivers may try and extend it another lap or 2, or maybe even 3 for that matter. But I think these drivers are definitely eyeing up the pit stops. I believe, yeah, just only a few drivers right now. I believe Shane Brown has actually come into the pits, although he's multiple laps down. Yeah, a lot of drivers, well, only a few drivers at this stage electing to pit. So we're going to get the nice overhead shot to see if any of these drivers come in, and neither of them does. First place doesn't, second place doesn't, third place doesn't. We'll see if fourth or fifth do, and neither of them do come into the pits. So they are electing to stay out a little bit longer. I think they're going to try and stretch farther past the halfway mark in this race so they can have a more a nice shootout towards the end. I think that's probably what these drivers are eyeing up right now, but one driver that's definitely eyeing up the other drivers up ahead is Bellinger, who maybe it was just from the other camera angle that I saw, but Bellinger is actually closing in a little bit, I feel, on that battle between, well, you can't really call it a battle because they haven't swapped spots, but he's definitely closing in on that pack right ahead of him of Hovesen and Dolmark. We'll have to see what Bellinger decides to do. I feel like that might be the smart decision for him. Maybe he'll just decide to stay out while the driver's up ahead of him. Pit, I say that. Dolmark's actually falling down the order. I'm not sure if that's some kind of technical issue there. Actually, no, he pops up back into second. So that's a just quick little technical glitch there from Dolmark there. But that would be a very interesting thing to follow. Does Bellinger follow those 2 into the pits, or does he try and pull off the undercut, or maybe he tries to go for the overcuts? What do you think, Taylor?
That's going to be tough, but if I was Dolmark, I'd rather stay the course potentially at the moment. Here's Cusano heading into the pits, and it'll be interesting to see how long his total pit time is, because that's always a good way you can talk about the other drivers, seeing where you come out of the pits, because the one thing you don't want is to exit the pits in the middle of a battle or with another driver right in front of you. Grizzle's pit stop was 55 seconds in total, so for the leaders, that would put them right next to Grizzle, ironically, when they exit the pits, or around that period. So that would certainly be interesting to see. I'm not sure exactly how long their pits will go. It could be a little bit faster, could be a little bit shorter. Cusano's pit stop lasted a total of 55 seconds on the dot on the pit lane. So yeah, if you're in the lead, you're a little bit worried, because you could have one driver in the way, but that could also then cost you a crucial 10th or 2 on the outlap. That could prove very crucial in terms of the rest of the race. Hovesen and Dolmark staying out this time around, but when it comes to the question for others pitting, we'll have to wait and see. Simon Atchell, he's going to enter the pits now. He'll be the first one of the lead pack to come into the pits. I also wouldn't be surprised maybe if Skalny elects for a potential pit stop soon, as he is still stuck behind Barrera, despite lapping pretty similar times with that potential more downforce setup.
That point that you bring up there about the pit stops is very crucial. It's just trying to exit the pits and getting that clean air. That is going to be vital for these drivers. We've seen that before. We've seen drivers try and pull off the undercuts, and if they just have dirty air during that pit stop, especially at a track like this, which is so tight and twisty, the dirty air plays much just a massive roll. That'll be a very big thing for these drivers tonight. They're going to have to try and focus really hard on that gap to see, okay, if I pit now, then I'll be in lap traffic, but if I pit in a lap, then I'll be in clean air. That's something that I'm sure all the drivers up and down the field are probably keeping a watchful eye on. I'm sure during the practice session earlier tonight, they were trying to test how long it would take for them to enter and exit the pits, because with only one pit stop in the series, that one pit stop is incredibly vital for how your race can turn out. So I'm sure these drivers know how long it'll take them on pit road depending on how much fuel they'll take in. So I'm sure these drivers know exactly what they're going to do, and I think they're going to have to use that knowledge soon, because I think these drivers are definitely going to be eyeing up some pit stops in the not too distant future. We've seen Time Admiral go in, and ooh, that was a big hit, wall hit there for Pern coming through the top end of the circuit. I'm not sure, maybe he has some kind of damage from that. That was a very significant tap for him. So maybe you'll have some mechanical damage. Definitely will have some kind of aerodynamic damage. So we might see Pern pull into the pits just to repair that aero damage, because that is a very big wall hit, and that'll act like he's dragging a parachute down the straightaway for him. He'll probably have to pull in soon. And one driver that's pulling in is Hovesen and Domark. They're into the pits now. So they are pulling in from 1 and 2. We'll have to see if Bellinger pulls in. Bellinger pulls in as well. Hovesen is at the fastest lap right now. I don't believe that was the lap he set last lap. That'd be very impressive. He did. Wow. He set that fastest lap, I believe, coming into the pits. Let me check my live timing screen to see if my eyes are just deceiving me. He did. He set the fastest lap on his in lap. That was mightily impressive there from Gregory Hovesen. So he pulls into the lead. The drivers are pulling into their pit boxes right now. You can see Justin Barrera farther back there. A lot of these drivers are pulling into the pits. This will be very crucial to see who pulls out first. Is it going to be Domark? It's going to be Hovesen that's pulling out first. Now, I was thinking that Domark might have to take a little less fuel there, but he actually took a little bit more fuel, was longer in the pits than his teammate Hovesen, so he is going to stay ahead there. Hovesen is going to stay in the lead, and Barrera has now jumped ahead of a few drivers there, and Admiral is just right at the back of shot there, so he's going to catch these drivers, and he's going to try and cut through them like a hot knife through butter here. This is going to be incredibly close as they go through the opening section of this lap.
Yeah, that is a crucial pit stop for Hovesen. Opens up a 2-second gap, and unless Domark can quickly cut that down where he's back within a comfortable slipstream range, it may be curtains for Hovesen if he can keep it clean, because that is a very comfortable lead, but a lot of close battles out of pit road, especially between Barrera, Hall, and Skalny, all within 1 second of each other. Should be extremely exciting as now they climb up the hill. Expect the slipstream to be very crucial for all three as we complete that middle section of the course. But yeah, they are right behind each other, far away from the podium fight. Bellinger pretty comfortable in P3, 5 seconds back on Domark, 7 on Hovesen. But these three are going to be battling for P4, best of the rest. And even behind them, Atril, if they're fighting and causing each other to go a little bit slower, he could join that fight too.
As important as that slipstream is, it also has the adverse effect of this section of the circuit. The dirty air is very vital, and we saw that there from Skalny, who actually hit the wall at the top end of the circuit. He might have some kind of damage on that car. That'll be even worse for him, I'm sure. Yeah, we'll get a good view to see just how slow that Porsche is in a straight line. Just, oh, it's painful to watch, seeing that car just drop off like a rock. You can see the BMW pulling away so badly going down the straightaway. I think Skalny in the not-too-distant future is going to be at risk of losing a position to Atril here, because Atril is just very close behind, and after a big dive bomb there, well, it wasn't really a dive bomb, but it was definitely very late on the brakes there for Skalny. I think the pressure is slowly getting applied to Atril. You can see it's a little bit of a gap between them, but I have a feeling that Skalny and Atril are going to be battling very soon.
I think the slower speeds actually do allow Skalny to get a little deeper onto the brakes, as he's also gained more time through that slower part going to the start-finish line. But yeah, certainly, it's hard to make the overtakes in a slower car. And that is unfortunate for Skalny. He's going to need a benefit off a mistake from Hall and Barrera, and you certainly have to imagine that these two are going to get some feisty battling within a few minutes' time when we start to seriously count down from 10 minutes. There's still a few more minutes to go before we really reach that point, but a lot of the action should be for P4, and Atril, I think certainly, Ron, will be a big part of this fight.
Yeah, I think Admiral is definitely looking to find some kind of retribution after the way his season has gone so far. He's had a really bad start to the year, respectfully so. He's just had some unfortunate incidents that have caught him out badly so far this season, so he's definitely looking for some kind of retribution, but I don't think he's going to force the issue too much, because what Admiral has to do in this race is he just has to see the checkered flag. That was his main goal coming into tonight's race, and I think that'll continue to be his goal, even though he sees some positions farther up ahead. He doesn't want to force the issue too bad and get caught up in someone else's mistake. So I think Admiral right now, although he will probably try and keep it clean, he definitely has the pace to try and contend. I say that actually, he's actually dropped back a little bit as Skalny has actually pulled closer to this battle that we're seeing between Barrera and Hall. The two Justins are battling going down the Conrad straightaway, the two BMWs going side by side, and now Skalny is looking very close. He's actually fairly fast straight line speed just because these two are slowing each other down going side by side. They continue to go side by side as they go into the chase. That's very close there. That's contact. That's more contact. Wow, that was some very close stuff there. That was definitely some rubbed fenders and some hurt feelings there between the two Justins as they battled going through the chase. And it's not over yet. Skalny is looking for the move going down the inside of Barrera, who looks to go down around the outside of Hall there. And he actually nearly gets that move done. They're still going side by side, and now Skalny is going to be stuck on the outside of Hall as they go into turn one. And now Simon Admiral is looking at all these three cars battling, as probably smelling blood at this stage of the race. It was a battle between Barrera and Hall. Now it's a battle between Skalny and Hall as they go side by side, going down the mound straight away. Surprisingly, Skalny is actually pulling a little bit closer. He's pulling a little bit ahead at the early part of that straightaway. I'm struggling to find the words right now. That was very close to contact as it went into turn two. This is some fantastic battling, very well heated, and right as we said in the final 15 minutes, these drivers were going to take their gloves off. We just see it right now as we're 34 minutes into this 45-minute race. Only about 11 minutes left. These drivers are getting really racy right now.
Yeah, certainly a lot of action on the final sector of the previous lap. Skalny had a chance on Hall, although now their little battle has given Barrera a little bit of room. The question will be how much that will last, because the slipstream will still be in range for Barrera as they continue. Skalny was also under pressure from Attrell entering the final corner. He fancied his chances down the inside, but ultimately thought better of it and backed away. And look at the man right behind him. Jake Luther is also closing up as Skalny right by Hall, although he's going to be probably not looking for the overtake at the moment. Luther could eventually. He's in that fast Ferrari and now is looking to make this a 5-car battle. They're a little more spread out, but I have a feeling as we continue, they'll start to bunch back up together, and we'll continue to see even more fighting as we wind down. Now under 10 minutes to go, entering the 35th minute. Skalny closing up to Hall, but there's not going to be a lot of room for the overtake. He's just going to be right behind him. Maybe if he gets a really good exit out of here. He does, but it's not going to be enough heading down into that final corner. And as they go down the start-finish straight, it'll still be P4 for Barrera, P5 for Hall, P6 for Skalny, P7 for Attrell, and now only about a second back from Attrell in 8th, Luther. So a lot of action yet to come, coming to the closing stages.
This is just incredibly close. I mean, you can see just, it's about 5 cars covered with a blanket of, actually, I say that, it's more 4 cars. Jake Luther's a little bit farther back. But speaking about Jake Luther, we haven't really mentioned him in this broadcast. He started off the year in fairly decent fashion. I believe he scored a podium at the first race of the season. In Sebring, actually finished very well. I'm not sure if, I do believe it was a podium in Sebring. So Luther has put together a very good season so far. Struggled a little bit last time out in Road America, but he's putting together a good drive right now. And if this battle continues to heat up even more and he keeps it clean, of course, we've mentioned it many times throughout this season, those Ferraris are really unstable to deal with in a track like this, which is a very unstable course to drive on regardless of what car you're driving in. That Ferrari is going to be very hard to circumnavigate this Bathurst track. But right now, Jake Luther is driving very well, and I think if he plays his cards right and maybe has some of these drivers farther up ahead start to battle just as hard as we saw a few laps ago, I think he might be able to get a really good result. Right now he's tracking well, and he might try and find a position that's even better. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out in the final few moments of this race.
Yeah, we certainly will, and I think the aftermath of that battle has given some breathing room for Barrera. If he's able to avoid a major mistake, he may be able to hold on to P4, but I certainly think Hall is going to want another chance at the position. They were side by side. There was a little bit of contact a few times between them, but things are a little more spread out. But how long will they be spread out for? Hall has just closed up a lot through that braking zone. As we continue right here, and looking overall, Pereira's done a great job. Qualified in 8th, now in P4. Hall qualified P6, now in P5. The only driver who dropped down in this little pack from their starting spot was Atril, who had started in P5, but now finds himself in P7, 3/10 faster that time by Hall, and he is not too far away from slipstream range, about 4/10 back as they begin the uphill climb, and you can watch as that number will continue to get dwindled away.
Is there, but I don't think he's going to go for the move going into 2, but these drivers are very close. I think this is definitely unfinished business after the battle that they had a few laps ago. I'm sure Justin Hall and Justin Barrera are probably upset at each other based off how that battling went. They made contact multiple times there, especially going through the chase, where I thought I had a sneaking suspicion that one of them was going to spin the other into the gravel and we were going to have a massive moment there, but they kept it surprisingly clean. I mean, they still made contact, but I think these drivers are not going to be too happy with each other. So I think we're going to see Hall and Barrera battle very hard, especially what's at risk. I mean, Barrera right now is in the championship fight. He's currently tied P2 with Bellinger, which how things are standing at the moment, that tiebreaker would be broken as Bellinger's running in the final podium spot right now. But Barrera is still looking to have a good drive, really damage recovery in the championship fight. He's looking to get that P4 finish, and I'm sure even though a top 5 would still be pretty good, I don't think he has any plans to finish 5th in this race, because also with how racy that Scowney has been in this race, if he falls back to P5, I think that Scowney is going to smell a little bit of blood in the water and maybe go for a move on Barrera. But one thing that we see up ahead is lap traffic. I'm not sure who that is. I believe that's I'm not sure who that is. I believe that's I'm not sure who that Mercedes is farther up ahead. That could be Brown farther up the road in that Mercedes. Ooh, that was very close there with Barrera and Hall going on the brakes going into chase. This lap traffic might get involved in this battle. It'll create a little wrench in the works here as we see the shot here. Oh, there's Barrera going for the dive bomb there. Thankfully, the laps car gets out of the way there. Thank you for your sacrifice there, laps car. We appreciate that. And they're still very close. I think this battle is going to get very spicy very soon.
It certainly will. By the way, Luther, he has to pull away from the battle. He had a pit on lap 1 as part of one of the early incidents. And Italiotis, who also pit early, needed that second pit stop. So unfortunately for Luther, the battle will officially go back down to 4 cars. But that doesn't mean the battle won't get a little feisty as we continue. Barrera, Hall, all of them still so close as they climb up the hill. I have imagined once we find ourselves onto that 3rd sector again, we could see an eventual attack by Hall. Maybe that time he'll go for the move. Maybe even up here he could be looking for the move. There's not a lot of space to make it happen, but he was able to close up a lot, and that ultimate slowdown has brought Atril back into the fight. He fell a little further back, trying to clear the lapped car. So a lot of action as they stay pretty much nose to tail through this section. Looking over to the leaders, Hovesen 4 seconds plus in front. He has been coasting. His last lap was a 2:02.29. Meanwhile, Domark was a 2:02.83. I think at this stage, unless Hovesen picks up a penalty, it will probably be him taking yet another victory. But what will really be up for grabs is that P4 position. Bellinger doing well will likely round out the podium. He's a little slower, but faster than that very aggressive pack. Hovesen very comfortably in front as he rounds out yet another lap around the track. We'll see maybe if this is another potential purple lap time, or he's just about the 2:02.29 he had last time out. Oh, nope, he's gone purple. That's a 2:02.116. That is absolutely beautiful to see. But Domark even going fast as well, setting a personal best, a 2:02.4. Bellinger a bit further back, 7/10 behind. And as they head into the final corner, no moves yet. But we'll have to wait and see what happens going up the hill, or maybe even going down into Hell's Corner in turn 1. Won't be anything for the moment. Both of them were looking to the inside, but this will be yet another big opportunity with the slipstream down the long straight. Atril will be probably wanting some popcorn at the moment as he watches this fight ensues. Not close enough to really take part. Skulny right there as well. Is there going to be a move to the inside? It doesn't look like it. I don't think Hall was just close enough.
Word of the day, and the word to describe this battle right now is impatient. I think Skalny is getting impatient with Hall. Hall is getting impatient with Justin Dive Bomber Barrera. I think these drivers are just feeling really impatient all around. I think Simon Admiral is just playing his time. As Sun Tzu said, a warrior's greatest attribute is his patience. So I think he's just trying to be very patient as these drivers are very impatient up ahead of him. I think he's got to think, if these three knuckleheads crash ahead of me, I'm going to have a very good result indeed. So I think Simon Admiral isn't going to force the issue, but I think he's definitely going to keep tabs on this battle, because with how hard they were battling a few laps ago, I think it's going to continue to heat up even more. I believe we have 2 laps left in this race. I believe Hovesen might actually be taking the white flag this time by, with only 43 minutes left in this race. I believe he will be taking the white flag this time around, so we don't have much time left in this race. Only less than 2 minutes left on the clock, and only about a lap and a half left for these drivers. Domark has put together a good drive. I think he's trying to take a bite out of that gap between him and Hovesen. He's set the fastest lap there. That was Hovesen that set the fastest lap, but I believe Domark is trying to fight back, just swing a little bit. Yeah, you can see the flagman waving. This is 1 lap to go in this race. Hovesen is on his way to a fairly dominant win, and you can see Domark very far behind in P2, about 5 seconds separating those drivers, and then even farther back is Olivier Ballinger, who we are thinking could have gone for a strategic move to possibly try and leapfrog his way into that lead pack fight, but he'll still probably take a good podium here, as the battle behind is more of a hornet's nest right now. We've got Barrera, we've got Hall, we've got Skalny, and we've got Admiral. 4 cars covered with a blanket right now. As we go through Hell Corner, it's still very close. Oh, there's Admiral going off a little bit. He does a little bit of lawn mowing. Coming through Hell Corner, his tires are not going to be very happy with that, but we focus on this battle between Barrera. We're looking from the gearbox of Barrera to Hall. Is Hall going to look for a move, maybe to the inside? Oh, he looks for it, and then tucks back in, closes a lot going into the brakes in turn 2. I think Hall's going to try and force the issue here. He knows that Barrera is possibly going to try and play it safe, but Barrera is, well, from his name, he's a dive bomber. He's a somewhat aggressive racer, so I think he might try and just hold off on this fight and hold on to that P4 spot for as long as he can. They're still extremely close there. I think Hall is getting very impatient right now. One driver that's looking at these 2 BMWs sizing up a battle with only moments left in this race is Skalny behind. I think he's going to be looking at these 2 battle and be like, oh, if these 2 crash, it is going to be my version of heaven. So we're following this battle right now. We're going to have to keep a close eye on it as they go down the Conrad straightaway. Hovesen's on his way to a dominant win. Oh, there's a big slide there from Hall. He had a big moment coming through the S's, lost a little bit of time there. He's going to have to focus on having a really good exit coming out of the dipper and through Forest Elbow, going on to that Conrad straightaway if he wants any chance to grab that P4 spot. And we're going to switch back to the leaders here momentarily, because Gregory Hovesen, you can see him flashing the lights and weaving already. He has put together a dominant race once again. He is going to go 3 for 3 here so far in the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series and take another dominant win here in this series, about 4 seconds to Hovesen. That is another dominant win from him. He is going to take the checkered flag with Bellinger in P3, and there's a crash there. Oh no. Hall is off. Admiral is moving up to P5. Skalny is off. I think Hall and Skalny might have made contact going into the corner, because Dive Bomb Barrera, he is off to a fairly controlling P4, and then Admiral's just barely behind. I think they made contact going in there. I think what might have happened there was that Skalny was looking to size up a move on Hall. Hall was just too far away from Barrera to size up a move, and I think it might have been some desperation there from Skalny. I'm not sure what happened there. Even our producer Josh is confused there. There's so much going on there. We saw some burnouts from our race winner. We're going to replay to see what in the world happened here. There's Skalny way farther behind. He goes for the dive bomb. Oh, that move was never on. That's sheer desperation there, folks. I'm sure Skalny, you could just see it in the way he was driving towards the end of that race. He was feeling really impatient. We're going to see the onboard here braking really late. Oh, in 3rd gear by the time he got down the inside of Hall. Just that move was never on. He was probably going way deep into that corner. He was probably going so deep into that gravel trap, and he went so far. He skipped Australia entirely and probably was going to end up in the Middle East there. He went so far deep going into that corner. So just that's such a shame, because that was looking to be a fantastic battle, and sadly it ends in tears.
Yeah, he was catapulting himself into the Pacific Ocean. Just a misjudged move. And you saw also he was slowing up, and he ultimately let Hull retake the position heading to the line after the incident. And that's just really unfortunate as well. It definitely was a big mistake from Scully, and it's ultimately hurt both him and Hull. Not too severely. They're still 6 and 7 overall. It's benefited Natural the most. He's up into P5, and Barrera probably takes a deep breath that he didn't get tangled up in the incident and holds on to now a lot more comfortable P4 position. Grizzle maybe a little disappointed that he couldn't snatch P6 or 7 in that fight as well, but yeah, just a little bit too much desperation there, Ron, and it's ended in tragedy for both Hull and Skelny.
That was tragic, but that was just, I mean, I mentioned it at the start of that lap. It was just sheer impatience that you're seeing out of those drivers. They were being and banging with each other. You could just tell from their general, you can't really call it body language because you can't see how they're acting in real life, but you can see where they're placing their race car, and you could just see that those drivers were getting a bit impatient, a bit antsy to try and pull off a move, especially on the last lap, trying to break into the top 5, which is what Scowney was trying to do there. And just, it's so unfortunate, because that was such a fantastic battle. It was still a fantastic battle, even with that incident taken into mind. But that was just, it goes back to impatience. That was just an impatient move there from Scowney. I'm sure he's going to regret that. Hopefully he'll try and do some kind of apology there. There's Hull, I believe, doing some donuts in the pit lane. But that was action-packed from start to finish. More strategic racing than we see in this series. It wasn't flat-out, wheel-to-wheel, just balls-out racing. That was just more strategic, you could say, but it was still some great racing action that we saw once again from the S1 Racing GT3 series. It hasn't disappointed so far this season. What do you think, Taylor? We're about halfway through the season. How do you think this season has been so far?
Oh, it's been great, and I certainly think this has been one of the more exciting finishes, ironically, because it was a pretty comfortable Hoverson win, but that battle in the middle of the pack, fighting for P4, none of those battles, I think, have disappointed throughout the year. From photo finishes to last lap incidents, there's always been something to watch and enjoy, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the season. We have so many fun tracks yet to go. My personal favorite will certainly be when it visits New York and Watkins Glen, heading back over to the States. But yeah, certainly a really fun race in Australia. And Ataliotis and Piran, the Ferrari's driving information, back to pit road to close out what has been an incredible day, an incredible third leg of the season.
Well, you mentioned some of the action that we have coming up here, and we will be returning stateside next time out here on Apex Racing TV for the S1 Racing Series, where we're going to be heading to Road Atlanta. Of course, IMSA is going to be racing there this weekend for the Petite Le Mans. That will be an exciting race. I'll certainly be watching that from start to finish here on the stateside, but we'll be racing there in 2 weeks' time on October the 25th. So if you want to see some more fantastic racing here from the S1 Racing GT3 Series on Apex Racing TV, you know where to find us here on October the 25th for the Road Atlanta round, which I'm sure is going to be even more exciting than the race that we had here tonight. That'll be at 9:10 Eastern, 6:10 Pacific. You know where to find us. And of course, Apex isn't just about the racing action that we have here in the S1 Racing Series. We've got some more racing action coming up here with the Radical Racing Series that'll be running at, I believe it'll be running at Spa this upcoming Friday. That'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And then we also have the ARL Prototype Series that'll be running at Watkins Glen. I know you mentioned that you'd be excited for the race at Watkins Glen, which is coming up later in the season, but I'll touch on that momentarily. Looking at the results for tonight's race here at Bathurst, it's Gregory Hoverson taking another dominant win, his third victory of the season, extending his championship gap even more over the competition. We have Domark, his teammate, finishing second for the second week in a row, and that's Olivier Bellinger, who is in P2 in the championship, I believe, finishing P3 in this race, grabbing his second podium of the year. And that's Justin Dive Bombarera, who's involved in that fantastic fight. He holds on to take P4. Simon Attrell with a Cheshire Cat's grin as he saw those two cars wreck ahead of him. He finishes in the top 5. And that's Justin Hall and Ryan Scowney, who were involved in that tragic last lap crash. They finish in P6 and P7 respectively. That's Grizzle in P8, who had a very under-the-radar race. He pitted very early and actually managed to make it work as he moved up into 8th, and that's the Hinza in 9th, Luther in P10, P10 who had to pit multiple times throughout this race. He rounds out your top 10. That's Matthew Perrin in 11th. That's Robert Elder in 12th. Adelotis in 13th. Casano in 14th. Pascal, Bialata, Brown, and Finch all finishing towards the back end of the field, and that's Retsma as well. A lot of drivers getting bitten by this very tricky track, very early incidents that certainly took out Retsma. He's your last place finisher tonight. Back of the pack, 22 laps down. So very challenging race for a lot of these drivers. Some incidents throughout, but still awesome to watch.
Yeah, for sure, and certainly disappointing for Retsma, who had a really good qualifying session. Qualified P4, had that early incident and ultimately missing the rest of the race. But I know for a lot of other drivers, it certainly was a good day. I know you'd mentioned Dinza's top 10 finish, gaining 6 positions en route throughout the race. But yeah, very solid day for so many drivers and just a lot of great racing as a whole.
Yeah, that was great to watch, and it's been great all season, you know, even though we've had one driver dominate all the races so far. It isn't like Formula One where anyone's only focused on the lead pack battle. We've had some great battling all throughout the field. We've had some dramatic moments, regardless of what track these cars and these competitors have run at, and I think it'll continue throughout this season. As I mentioned, we'll be running at Road Atlanta in 2 weeks' time. Then we'll be heading off to Germany to run at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit on November the 8th, and then we'll be heading off to Watkins Glen. I know that's your favorite. That will be the final round of the season on November the 22nd, so we've got some brilliant stuff coming up here with the S1 series. We've got some brilliant stuff here on Apex. We've got some racing action all up and down the field, and Apex isn't just about the racing action too, it's about some insight as well. The late Apex series, which was always a big fixture here on Apex Racing TV, has returned. It returned last week and it will return once again on Friday. That'll be starting at the same time as a Radical race at Spa. That'll be starting at 5 p.m. EST, 2 p.m. Pacific. So if you want to get some insight into the world of sim racing, you know where to tune in here on Apex. But we had some brilliant racing here, and we also have some brilliant sponsors that make these broadcasts possible. Dr. Drabber and Zine, who have supported us throughout this season. We couldn't put on these broadcasts, and we couldn't put on this racing if it wasn't for them. They've been a big factor in putting on these fantastic races, and hopefully we put on some equally good broadcasts to cover these great races. So I think that'll just about do it for tonight's racing action here from the S1 GT3 series. At Bathurst, it was a great race, action-packed from start to finish, and I hope you enjoyed it at home. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Taylor Stolworthy joining me in the commentary booth, and Joshua Wilkie working all the cameras in the production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time when we run at Road Atlanta. Have a great rest of your night.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.